our first presentation that's going to come from the boss lady for the Project Management and Research Department at JBDC, Mrs. Lisa Taylor Stone, who is a researcher extraordinaire, and she is going to be speaking with us on the actual research findings that were conducted in 2016 on employee engagement in Jamaica, and she has some very important and significant findings. Now, please help me welcome Mrs. Lisa Taylor Stone.
Good morning. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, we are finally here. We're finally here. And I'd just like you to give yourselves a round of applause for wanting to challenge yourselves. In 2015-16, the JBDC executed an employee engagement survey. And for us, it came from resounding demand of the persons who attended the JBDC research coaching workshop for HR practitioners and middle managers. At JBDC, we pride ourselves in delivering robust research data that guides our program implementation, because we do believe that we have the responsibility to our clients to offer solid products and services. Now, the rationale for executing this survey came from the fact that data pretty much is fragmented on employee engagement. In fact, many companies are still measuring employee satisfaction, and they haven't made a link between engagement, workplace productivity, and really enhancing the overall morale of the company and inspiring persons to serve at their best, winning over not just their minds but their hearts as well. Hidden data from the fact that there are companies who execute employee engagement survey, but this information is not available publicly. The information that was published, I believe, in the Gallup survey that covers Latin America and the Caribbean, Jamaica is not singled out anywhere. So it was our intention really to provide this information on the platform in Jamaica. I mentioned client demand already, and it is also aligned to the development plan Vision 2030 in terms of making Jamaica a place to raise our families and do business. All of this is aligned to employee productivity. It is aligned to employee engagement. And we also wanted to know the link and implications for productivity as well. Now, some quick facts in terms of creating the context. Productivity is a function of employee engagement. And over the years between 1990 and 2013, Jamaica recorded the lowest labor productivity in the Caribbean, and this is according to a report that was published by the Jamaica Productivity Center. When we look at the financial costs that employee engagement comes with, we have no information for Jamaica whatsoever, but we estimate that it is in the billions. For the US, this is close to 170 billion per annum, and in Britain, at 62 billion pounds. So we understand that we have a problem in that regard. So the overall objective of the study was to diagnose the state of employee engagement nationally, and also to determine the drivers of employee engagement. What we used to execute the study was the Youth-Rich Worker Engagement Scale, version 17, and according to that scale, it defined engagement as a positive, fulfilling, work-related state of mind that is characterized by vigor, dedication, and absorption. Vigor in terms of how it is that I execute my job, type of energy level that I bring to the table, how dedicated am I in terms of experiencing work and adding my own individual contribution to work with enthusiasm, inspiration, pride, and challenge. And absorption, do I check the watch each time, or am I working to the point where it gets dark and I hardly notice? In terms of the methodology that we use, we spoke to in excess of about 500 government and private sector employees from 37 entities island-wide. The survey was executed between January 2015 and February 2016 over a 5-month period. We had some breaks in between, we experienced some challenges as well. In terms of how the data was collected by structured survey using a mixture of online, face-to-face, and telephone interviews. As I mentioned before, we use the worker engagement scale to measure engagement using a 17-question questionnaire, as well as the Berkeley's climate survey factors. Now, this survey, in terms of the sampling method, we use quota and convenience sampling. It's not nationally representative. It wasn't designed to be. It was a pilot study, but it definitely contributes useful insights about the state of employee engagement in Jamaica. Now, for some of the major findings, and before I get into the engagement figures, in terms of the profile of the persons, most persons who participated in the survey were females in excess of 60%. In terms of tenure, most persons worked with organizations 5 years and more. Most persons were permanent staff in excess of 60% as well. And all age groups are represented, with the bulk coming from the 25 to 35-year-olds. And most persons, the majority, in excess of 80%, were non-management employees. Now, what does the face of employee engagement look like in Jamaica? The study found that 3 in 4 workers were engaged. 3 in 4, yeah? And I heard a comment pretty much regarding this data that it's pretty good. I disagree, and I'll tell you why a little later. And 1 in 4 worker is disengaged. Now, just imagine you have a company with 4 persons. One of them is actively looking, looking at the scenery, trying to sink the boat, pretty much. Now, let's take a closer look at employee engagement. That accounts for 42% of the persons who participated in the survey, which means that they are engaged for at least 60% of the work month, 12 days and more. Persons who were moderately engaged were only engaged for 20% of the work month. And we brought these two figures to give you the 75%, that is the 3 in 4. And that is the reason why I said that the figures weren't good. In terms of disengagement now, 25%, the 1 in 4, 15% of that, 21% of that 25% were only engaged for 15% of the work month. Just imagine that. And persons, you see the guy there sleeping, about 3% were actively disengaged, don't do any work at all, and engagement came probably 1 day out of the entire month. I will have 20 to 21 day work months in Jamaica and globally, I believe, as well. For some persons within the private sector, within the public sector, the private sector is different. In terms of looking at a comparison for employee engagement, public versus private, we're seeing here that in the private sector, it's just about 4 percentage points higher than in the public sector. So employee engagement is more widespread in the public sector in the private sector rather, as opposed to the public sector. The drivers of employee engagement, the top driver of employee engagement in Jamaica is satisfaction and loyalty. When we did the multiple regression analysis, this single factor accounted for over 30% of the variation in employee engagement. Perception of the job is another critical area, support and recognition, and development plans. These are very, very important factors that as employers we need to look at. What kind of environment are we creating for our talent? And how it is that we keep them engaged. We looked at the data in terms of age and employee engagement. We found that older persons, 58 years and older, display the highest engagement scores, and they were also more likely to be engaged as opposed to Generation Z, the 18 to 24-year-olds. They display the lowest engagement rate. And there's a segment in this session that will deal specifically with this particular workforce. They are bright, they're savvy, they're edgy. How it is that we keep them. And the truth is that engagement is a function of management, so we have to learn how to manage that. In terms of tenure, persons employed less than a year had the highest engagement level, and that is expected. You just start the job, you want to impress, so you put your all out. As job years increase in terms of tenure, the scores also increase steadily and then start to decline after a period of time. Now, this particular finding, for us, it is most profound, hence the reason for hosting this conference. Employee engagement is a function of leadership. It is a function of management. And we have a misconception that employee engagement should be really confined within the ambits of the Human Resource Department. It is not so. It is the responsibility of the line leader. It is the responsibility of the department heads to engage the staff. I mean, leaders are paid to be engaged, and that is why the disparity in salaries are so high. The fact that you are well taken care of, it means that the persons, yes, it is true, it is true, it is true. You can compare the salaries of, for example, the admin assistant and the department head, or for example, the admin assistant and the CEO. Leaders are paid to be engaged, and this is one of the reasons. And this is not just locally, this is worldwide statistics. It's aligned, it's corroborated by worldwide data that leaders, managers and executives and supervisors, line managers, display higher levels of engagement than their non-management staff. And this is a gross disconnect. And that is why we have the onus and responsibility to ourselves and our team to ensure that we deal with employee engagement from the top, from the leadership level. Once we get it right there, then everything else should fall in place. Some other things that we found from the survey: we measured climate, organizational climate indicators, things like employee and supervisor relations, line of sight, that has to do with how it is that my own success is affected by the company's success, and vice versa, teamwork and collaboration, development plan, etc. And what we found is that these areas performed okay, right? By this I mean that 63 to 65% of the persons viewed this as favorable within their organization. Areas that didn't do so well included training and development, strategy alignment, satisfaction and loyalty, empowerment and compensation. Empowerment and compensation and benefits is highlighted in red because empowerment got one of the lowest scores in terms of the number of persons who agreed that this particular indicator was favorable within their organization. And persons want to be empowered. Professor Pinnock spoke about it. Ken spoke about it last night at the pre-conference connection in terms of empowerment. The number one reason that allows persons to become engaged. They want to feel valued, and they said it in the survey, so we have to listen to them. Compensation and benefits is another area that came out as a sore point. I think that received the lowest score, 24% being of the persons saying that it is favorable within their organization. Now, an important note that I want to bring out in this presentation is the fact that the private sector employees outperform public sector employees on all indicators of organizational climate except training and development. We're getting it right in the public sector in terms of the training that we do. We develop a lot of policies and procedures, and it's not a criticism of the public sector, really. It is what persons have conveyed in the survey. But are we managing our people? How it is that we empower them? And this conference really is about seeking to do that, empowering our leaders and powering up the leaders so that they can empower the persons who report to them. Now, some trends in global engagement. So in the black, that's Jamaica at 75%. Globally, employee engagement is 63%. And the study that was executed by JBDC that found Jamaica's rate to be 75% is aligned to the Gallup study that was done within Latin America and the Caribbean that found employee engagement to be just about the same, 75%. So we have a challenge to ourselves, basically, and we have a responsibility to our employees. We're responsible for their growth and development. And I mean, the persons who are here to deliver presentations on employee engagement, they are going to talk about the strategies that they have implemented themselves locally, the strategies that have worked. And we're going to have a very honest conversation. So we're not here to just speak at you and tell you what is in the textbook. Some of that will come, yes, but we're going to hear real stories from some very powerful companies locally that talks to us about how it is that we have done it. Where were we at first and where we are today? Ladies and gentlemen, this slide is probably my favorite slide in the presentation because it advertises the services done by the Project Management and Research Department. It is a shameless pitch, but thank you so much for listening and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Any questions for Mrs. Taylor-Stone?
Could you clarify how the survey results were applied? Because if you have 3 out of 4 individuals who are supposed to be engaged, and yet still you say that we have a low engagement, then I heard you apply the scores in a way that I didn't quite follow. So help me to understand that.
All right. So I'm going to go back to this slide. The 3 in 4, the 75%, is broken out as such. 41% of the persons within that 75 are highly engaged. Based on the scale that we use to measure engagement, this means that only 60% persons, those 41% of persons who are highly engaged, they are engaged for 60%, for at least 60% of the work month, for 12 days or more. For the second segment of persons that would fall under the moderately engaged section, which I think is about 34%, that would end up coming together to give it a 75%, they are moderately engaged. And moderate engagement means that persons are engaged for only 20% of the work month. So engagement, so the basis on which we measure engagement is that for us, no employee can be completely disengaged. You must do work at some point within the work month. The frequency of engagement is what is being measured and clarified as such. So the 35% who are moderately engaged are engaged for at least 20% of the work month. And 20% of the work month work out to be about 4 days or more. So if I'm engaged for just 4 days of the work month pretty much, then we still have a problem. So that is why I'm saying that even though within this category of employee engagement, we put the 75% in terms of moderately engaged and highly engaged, we still have a problem in terms of the frequency of engagement, hence the conversation we're having here today.
The research demonstrates that an employee is either engaged or not engaged. And then you have variations of that, with them being highly or moderately engaged. But the fact is you're either engaged or not engaged. If those are true, then how can we now say that an employee is engaged for a portion of the time and not a portion of the time? Because the definition suggests that you're engaged based on the parameters you've indicated. I love my job. I enjoy what I do. I can't wait to get to work in the morning. It gives me great satisfaction. So although you may have variations in your mood, the point is you're either engaged or not engaged. So I'm having a difficulty with the clarification you're giving that you're engaged for a portion of the time. And because you're engaged for a portion of the time, you're either engaged or not engaged. That is disaggravating, it's skewing the information. And I'm not quite sure that I concur based on my own research in my own organization. So can you help me with that?
And probably the reason why you're having that concern is that the engagement scores are measured on a Likert scale from 1 to 5. So there are degrees of engagement. So it's not a yes and no, either engage or disengage. The reason why we chose, hold on, let me address the question first. Hold on, let me just address what you asked. The reason why we chose the youth-rich worker engagement scale is that it is not very distinctive and exclusive in terms of lumping persons within the disengagement and the engagement. We believe it's completely impossible for you to come to work and be completely disengaged all the time. That's all we are saying. So we measure the frequency of engagement instead. Does that help? No, you're still not getting it. But we can agree to disagree though. So it's based on a difference in instrument. Because I'm sure, I know which organization you're representing, and I'm sure your instrument is quite different. And that is why we have used this standard to measure employee engagement, because it is in terms of the context of Jamaica and what we are accustomed to within the Caribbean, especially this country. It makes more sense for us to measure the frequency of engagement.
Okay, what our CEO, Ms. Vera, is saying is that there will be opportunity to have further dialogue. Mrs. Taylor-Stone has sent the full copy of the report to everyone, and we do encourage feedback, so you will have an opportunity to do that once you review the document, and you can email and have some discussions about it after the conference.